Welcome to this next episode of YouTube. And apologize for the delay, but the International Wolf Center did host an Alpha member weekend, and that's where we pay tribute to our highest level of members at the International Wolf Center. And we had a great weekend. We had great weather, temperatures in the 70s and sunny, and although the temperatures are a little warmer here than we normally see in September and the fire danger is a little high, the wolves seem to be doing just fine with the weather conditions. We are, again, feeding Luna and Bolts twice a day. Their preference right now is turned to chicken. For a while it was beef. They still get the deer carcass on Saturday night with the rest of the pack, and they do feed on that Saturday and Sunday and into Monday. But for the most part, we try to make sure that Luna has her supplement every morning and that Bolts and Luna have a good supply of food. Bolts is weighing about 73 pounds and Luna is about 55 pounds. And so we're, definitely seeing the pup look to them kind of going away, although still got that narrow kind of pup face to them. So as you see Bolts and Luna up here in the woods, kind of looking at digging up caches. So that's one thing that we do see. They're very skilled at caching their own food as well as finding other caches throughout the woods. And that's Bolts picking up a chicken cache there. So as we said, we had the Alpha weekend. We were able to share some, insight on what's going on with the pack, what we see for the prediction for the pack future. Right now, we're definitely seeing pups that are engaged in some social play. Here, they've just captured a bird, and it is the fall bird migration, so birds are landing in the pen. Some are not so successful getting out of the enclosure. And we see Luna being much more dominant and much more bold with any interactions. And here Bolts is down on the ground. He has the bird for a moment, but clearly Luna wants it, and so Luna's going to do a little bit of kind of just posturing, doing a little bit of scruff grabbing, and then come in and stand over it, kind of push, and then start to get into a little threat display with Bolts, and eventually just takes it from him. Bolts being the male, the bottom of the male rank order, he is a little bit more timid, so we do have to watch him more carefully to make sure he gets his food that he needs in order to grow, and is obviously growing well. Again, 73 pounds is a good weight for a pup coming into 5 months and going on to 6 months of age. So we are seeing Aiden again continuing to guard, and he does a little bit of a block there, just stands over the pups for a second. We don't have any troubles with Aiden from the standpoint of taking food from the pups. As a matter of fact, what we see with Aiden is he'll pick up food and he'll carry it and he'll kind of whine and try to get the pups to follow him, and then gives that food to the pups. So that's, again, still a real strong behavior we're seeing from Aiden. Lots of chase scenes, and this is Luna and Bolts over that same bird. Bolts now has it and Luna wants it. What's interesting is when Aiden comes up, when there's a chase scene involving Luna and Bolts, Aiden comes over. He does not dominate Luna. He goes after Bolts. And so you can see Luna running there, Bolts running, and it's hard to get a good camera angle when they're all kind of running at you. But here's Aiden doing a scruff bite on Bolts and trying to get him to submit. And Bolts running away with the bird. With his hackles up, he's got a T1 through 4 there. Hackles at the neck all the way down to the base of the tail. And again, no of interest in dominating Luna in this situation. It's clearly just Bolts. And so Aiden does seem to be a little protective of Luna, or a little bit more inclined to dominate Bolts in this male rank order. So that continues, and nothing real too serious. I mean, Bolts does get the bird and will shred it, and not a lot of meat on there, but it's more or less just something to stimulate their predatory drive. Doesn't necessarily substitute a meal by any means. The deer carcass, which is in there fed on Saturday nights, will still have food, and they'll feed on that deer carcass, as well as, like I say, get a morning meal and an evening meal offered to them. It's up to them if they want to take it. but we do take the time and the patience to be able to make sure that they get the resources that they need. So we're working on the webcams. Our next goal is to hopefully get a webcam back on this den. That does seem to be a source of activity for them, and that it will be a live streaming webcam through Ustream. And the pups do spend a fair amount of time there in the mornings. Unfortunately, this is not on the view of the current Ustream camera. This is a kind of a different area within the enclosure, but it is one of those places where you have the opportunity to kind of do a lot of chasing, a lot of climbing. And here's Aiden again coming back over to dominate bolts. And it's pretty mild-mannered. Now, Denali is out. Denali's usually locked up for feeding and then let out right after feeding, and that's the reason why. Because he eats everything that's left over in the pen and has no respect for the pups, just takes food from them. So we typically will lock him up prior to feeding the pups and then let him back out again. So as I said, the pups are real playful. Doesn't have to be birds. It can be birch bark. And this is what Luna's got, a little birch bark. It kind of leads to a little bit of a jaw spar between Bolts and Luna. And so it's not necessarily have to be food related for them to play with it. They're, again, very socially engaged. And these two get along extremely well. We see them seeking each other out. We see where one is, the other is soon to follow. And that's really was a concern for us in getting pups that were, 8 days older from each other, not genetically related, but they seem to have a good relationship, and that is very, very important, especially when pups like to play and the adults, as you see, are not as enthusiastic about play. They may put a pup down for playing too roughly. If there's only one pup, that pup would never get to play, versus having two pups, they get to socially interact with each other. And that's Aiden, who just kind of keeps walking through, does a body block to Bolts there. And Bolts has been looking up at the sky quite a bit. We've had a lot of plane activity. Again, no fires near the center, but there are wildland fires in the wilderness that seem to get him stimulated. And over in retirement, this is Grizzer doing one of the longest and highest RLUs we've seen in a while. And so that's the RLU raised like urination there. And as I said, Grizzer typically, with the wolf care staff, is very curious at what goes on in the yard, where people are, what the interactions are, always looking for Oscar, always looking for, movement around the wolf yard. So he stays to the front pretty much most mornings, and that's where we see him. And then later in the day, he may go to the back of the exhibit where he sleeps on the den and, kind of keeps watch of the exhibit pack. But for the most part, in the front is where you'll find him with the wolf care staff. He's pretty much right underfoot, so oftentimes hard to get a really good activity of him because he's sniffing where wolf care staff have been, or he's, if we just picked up scat and walked through there, he's going to be mindful of where we picked up scat and really kind of focus on it. We did wash his pond here about a week ago. This is probably the last pond washing that's going to go on before we drain the pond for the winter. The temperatures tonight are predicted to be below 30, probably around 27 degrees. And so water's going to start freezing fairly quickly. So we pulled all the hoses, made sure, the ponds will stay liquid because there's not that hard of a freeze. And actually during the day we might get temperatures warming in the 50s and the 60s. But this is one of the places why we chose the webcam originally to go on this den is because this is one of the places that Grizzer looks most majestic. He's up tall. He's got a great vantage point. He can see not only into the exhibit pack, but he can see a ways down the hill. He can see back towards the yard. He can see the garage, and he's very engaged. And that's a really positive thing about the new enclosure, the new habitat we built him now 2 years ago, was that we wanted him to feel part of this social group, even though he's not in with the wolves. And we've done that through placement of enclosure far more than we have, obviously, of putting him in a situation where it's risky for his well-being to be with other wolves. He has the opportunity to engage visually as well as howling and interacting, but he's safe where he is right now. And so most of the photos from the wintertime will be from this den. That is once the leaves fall off the trees, he's got a better vantage point, and he sees better, and he's very, very alert. And that's a wolf who's 8 going on 9 years of age. Sometimes they start to get a little less sensory abilities, and he's doing real well. So as I said, we filled the retired pen as well. We watched their pond. Shadow's one of Shadow's favorite things to do is drink right out of the hose while it's filming, and he's, you're hearing ravens in the background there. So Shadow coming in and out of the pond comes from the back of the pond there, and getting a good view of that cover that helps keep that pond shaded. And as we said before, we're starting to see a lot more posturing with these two. Certainly, they're just because they're 12 doesn't mean that they're out of the picture. Shadow doing some chin rest and doing a little bit of a threat display and growl as Malik kind of walks away. They're going to see this posturing. These two are very good at body posturing and showing rank order with these subtle behaviors. And as we said, this just avoids a lot of conflict. If there's a clear idea who's in charge, there's not going to be conflict when it comes to more serious issues. Shadow is very overt about this. He physically does a chin rest and pushes down on Malik, and then you see him actually do an anal scent gland sniff there, which causes a little bit of anxiety from Malik. Not his favorite thing. And so he's going to growl in response to Shadow, and then going to totally avert Shadow's gaze. Shadow's going to try it again, do another anal scent gland sniff. Again, just a little bit more of that dominant posture, and finally Malik leaves, and Shadow follows. So this is kind of what the winter is going to be like. So we haven't shown Oscar for a while. Oscar doesn't have a lot to do with pups anymore. He's been going home with staff every night, and he's emptied out his toy box in the yard. So we've got all kinds of toys that people have given him. And we do a little tug of war, which we don't normally do with Oscar, but he's by himself, so his boredom level is a little high. He is right in the yard, though, in front of Grizzer, and he'll run over there with his toys and throw them up in the air. By now, Grizzer's pretty well used to him. He's had, the morning full of Oscar playing with his toys, so Grizzer doesn't even come out anymore. But that is a behavior that we see back and forth. And again, he is just like the wolves. He comes right up to the camera, so oftentimes hard to film him, but he's doing well. We obviously want to deal with that boredom issue during the day and make sure that he's got ample toys, which he sure does. So that's it. Again, thanks for watching, and we appreciate your tolerance and the late delay on posting this. We will see you next week.